Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 2021 film Last Night in Soho. I had a few people request that I review this film. Since it's a newer film, this will be a no spoiler review, although I will talk a little bit about some of like the themes and subtext in as vague ways as I can, but I won't talk about really the actual events of the film other than just a really quick little synopsis that really won't give a whole lot away. Now, some people had said, I'd heard people saying online and read some articles that had basically said that they believed this was a giallo film or like a modern day giallo film. It's not a giallo film. Maybe some giallo inspiration in there. Definitely, I can see that. Maybe specifically more some Dario Argento inspiration with some color usage. And then also kind of like twist ending type inspiration from giallo, sure. But not a giallo film. But anyway, I think it's a very enjoyable film. I really, really like this film. So you'll know that my rating at the end is going to be good, but wait till the end to see just how good my rating is. The film's done by Edgar Wright, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Edgar Wright. He's done stuff like Spaced, which was kind of this British comedy, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard is awesome. And that's kind of what started the whole thing with the guys who did Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead and The World's End, those types of films. He also did Shaun of the Dead, directed that. Obviously, a groundbreaking horror comedy that it still endures today. Hot Fuzz, which is so fun. Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is obviously not horror, but a very enjoyable, very, very awesome film. And Baby Driver, which I haven't seen Baby Driver, but I've heard good things. And based off of Last Night in Soho, I'm probably going to bump Baby Driver up my queue to watch. This was written by Wright as well as Krysty Wilson-Cairns. And Krysty Wilson-Cairns had also written a bunch of episodes for the show Penny Dreadful, which if you hadn't seen the show Penny Dreadful, I believe it was on Showtime. Great show. The first season was quite good. The second season I thought was even better. The third season, yeah, not that great. But good show overall nonetheless. And her writing, I mean, Wright and Wilson-Cairns' writing of this script, it's a very well-written script. She also wrote 1917 and The Good Nurse, just so people know. Thomasin McKenzie is the main character in this film. Unbelievable. That her acting performance, I've never seen her in anything before, but this acting performance is insane. It's a demanding role, and she more than nails it. You can feel, I wrote down, you can feel everything her character is feeling just because of how good her acting is. And that's line delivery, and that's facial acting, and that's physical acting other than her face. It's all there. It is all there. She is outstanding. And the thing is, Anya Taylor-Joy is in this film, and she's awesome. Like, we all know that she's a wonderful, wonderful actress. And she gets outshined by Thomasin McKenzie because of how strong this performance is, because of how she just nails it. So I really can't say enough about how Thomasin McKenzie did this. And I look forward to seeing her in more stuff. So quick synopsis. It's about a main character who is kind of from a more rural town in the UK who decides that she's going to go to design school in London, specifically in the Soho area, the Soho district. And she's very much out of her element. She ends up moving into this place where she starts to have these very vivid, almost realistic dreams where she's kind of stepping into the place of and observing this person from the 60s. And there's mystery involved with it, and things get out of control and crazy, and that's as much as I want to say about it. I highly recommend it. It's a very well done film. It looks phenomenal. And it's almost 2 hours, but the pacing is great nonetheless. And I think a lot of that has to do with A, the material, B, the script is tight, even though it's a longer script, and C, the way it's directed, it's very like quick and snappy. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the specific elements of what makes it quick and snappy, in my opinion, but it moves. I mean, it's almost 2 hours, and it feels like it needs that to tell the story. Sure, there are a few areas where they could have cut it down a little bit, but I'm not complaining at all. It moves very, very well nonetheless. The beginning is a very good establishment of the personality of the main character, which is important because there's a lot of character development in this film, and so getting a really good baseline in the beginning of where this character is starting serves to show people the changes over time. And then if you look at in the beginning of the film versus the end of the film, you can see just how much development has actually happened. And that's one of the things I feel like is lacking in a lot of films is character development. And I think it's done extremely well in this film, and that speaks to how good the script writing is. The music integration is wonderful. There's a lot of music that's going to be very familiar to people, but it's done in like an older style. It's like an older version of the film from the 60s. So there will be stuff that people immediately recognize, but it'll be like, oh, that's a different version than I'm used to hearing. And it's cool. It's integrated extremely well. Obviously, directing and cinematography is excellent, very much so. There's something they hint at potentially being at play early on in this film, and it's signaled to the audience with a specific look from a specific character. Obviously, I'm being very vague because I don't want to give anything away, but there's something they kind of hint at to kind of muddy the waters with who the audience believes they can trust. And it's smart because they need to kind of keep things very much up in the air so that they can really nail things with twists when they come much further down the line. And I think it's very well done. They laid the tracks quite well in order to set people up to feel kind of like, I'm not 100% sure what's going on here, until they nail the twist and tell you what's going on there. So, pretty nice. I did see a little bit coming at the end, but I didn't expect things to play out the way they did, and there was plenty of surprise still there. So, quite good. There's very good visual use of mirrors in this film, and I'll talk a little bit more about that after I've talked about all the kind of like in-film stuff. Yeah, mirrors are heavily featured, which actually does make me think about giallo films, because a lot of giallo films used mirrors a lot. They like to show the reflections of people, and a lot of the times that had to do with duality and trying to portray in a visual sense the duality of characters. So I will come back to that in a minute. The directing is done in such a snappy way that the film just jaunts along. Which, when was the last time you heard someone use the film jaunt? Or the word jaunt, but it occurred to me when I was making that note. Yeah, it's just got this upbeat pacing, even though it's not always upbeat stuff that's going on. There's specifically one scene that is like a nightmarish scene, and it's not like a nightmare in the sense of what's happening. Like, yes, in a sense, what is happening is nightmare-ish, but based off of how you shoot it and the music you put to it, it could be portrayed in different ways. And how they shot it has this mixture of like this nightmare quality to it, but also being like very upbeat and quick-paced. And the music on top of that and how they integrated that like really makes it feel like this kind of dizzying, like dread-filled nightmare situation, but also like, you know, upbeat and moving. It's this really weird thing, but it works extremely well. There is a considerable amount of character development, like I already talked about. The camera work in addition. In that nightmare situation, the nightmarish scene, the camera work, a lot of the camera work and how it moves so fluidly has to do with that nightmarish feeling. Lots of great sudden transitions in this, which really does help with the pacing. It'll be kind of one of those things where it's like something's happening in a scene and you don't expect it, because it's kind of like they use the end of one scene to seamlessly transition to another scene, where it's kind of like you don't think so, but they kind of like use the space that they're already in as the beginning point of the space that they're going to. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but if you've seen the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. And a lot of those types of transitions like really help with kind of like smooth movement and keeping the pacing really going, because there's a lot like that. There is a pretty intense scene about 1 hour and 10 minutes into the film that you feel pretty awful about. Like, not only is it so intensely shot that like it is kind of scary, it is kind of dread-filled and intense, but the events of what's going on you feel bad about. And you're just like, oh man, because your head starts to go off and think about the implications of what's happening here for a few characters. And yeah, it's good. It makes you feel things that you don't want to feel necessarily, and that goes back to really good writing, in my opinion. Really good twist that changes everything in the film. Even if people see twists coming a lot of the times, like I said, I saw a little bit of the twist coming, but even if people see twists coming, as long as it's well executed, as long as it's a good idea, which it very much is in this film, it plays out quite well. I really enjoyed the twist of this film. I hope everyone enjoyed it. It's really good. And if you're watching this and you haven't watched it, obviously, I'm highly recommending it, so check it out. This film features duality very strongly. The mirrors that I talked about as being a visual representation of duality, showing two of the person in certain scenes, shows that there's two sides to a person. Two primary color usages, but also there's a third color that comes in. And I'll just tell you, it's literally red and blue a lot of the times, but there is one scene in particular that is purple, which, if you take note, is the combination of the colors of red and blue. So it's really trying to tell you in those scenes, signal to the audience what is going on here with the duality. There's this side of personality, this side of personality, and then the in-between of things just coming together. Very interesting, very well done, a very cool visual way to show things, to signal things to the audience, but then it's also just, from an aesthetic standpoint, just looks great using those colors. And the other thing is character traits. Character traits also are used within this to show duality as well. Very heavy on the duality. There's a theme in this of the everyday horrors of female life at the hands of chauvinistic men, and how moving individuals and society away from this can do justice for those who have already been victimized, in a sense. You know, you can't truly get justice necessarily for people who have had wrongs done to them in the past and they weren't properly handled then, but it's kind of a bit of this theme of, we need to learn from this, we need to move forward and not forget how things were and how bad stuff was. And I'll kind of circle back to that in a second. Also, there's a heavy theme of trauma and how it affects people individually as well as collectively. And obviously, this is something that gets used in horror quite a lot. Trauma being used as themes and subtext. So I'm not surprised to see that, but I think it's integrated pretty well in this. So I'm all about it. There is an amazing quote in this, and I won't tell you who says it, I won't tell you when it's said, but it's a wonderful quote that applies to a lot of things. We all pay for broken mirrors. And I believe when it's said, there is definitely a deeper meaning to it, and they're signaling something to the audience. But I don't want to talk too deeply about that, but we all pay for broken mirrors. Yeah, and it ties into like the subtext and the total theme, overall theme of the film. And the last thing I want to say is this. It's kind of like a bit on a personal note. This film embodies something my mother has told me repeatedly throughout my life. The good old days were not good, especially not for women. So she always says, you know, when people talk about, when people talk about wanting to go back to the good old days, they're usually thinking from an aspect of like one thing or another. But overall, the good old days were not good. And especially for certain groups of people, they were terrible. And my mother has been a big proponent of conveying to me throughout my life that her life could have been significantly different as far, you know, from like a professional standpoint and otherwise, as far as what she was allowed to do. Because when she grew up, she was told a lot, you're a woman, that's not an option for you. So instead of looking at doing this with your life, you should look at doing this with your life. Obviously, we've gotten away from that a lot. We still have a far way to go. But I think this film kind of drives it home. It's important to understand where you've been personally and within society and where you are currently and where you should be going. So that's kind of my feelings on it. But would love to hear other people's opinions on this film. Go ahead and put it in the comments, and we can talk spoilers in the comments. Go ahead, spoilers in the comments. Tell me if you liked it, didn't like it, in between. But tell me why. Don't just say I liked it or didn't like it. Give me a little bit of an explanation. Just like a sentence or two is fine. Because I just want to understand why people are coming from a certain opinion. Because really, if people just say I like it, I didn't like it, like that doesn't really mean anything to me. Yeah, I just need a little bit of extra. Anyway, do me a quick favor though. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That is your way to repay me if you like this video or any video I have ever done. I really, really do appreciate it. It keeps me motivated to keep doing these videos. When I'm putting this together right now, I'm not making money doing this. Who knows if I ever will do that. It's up to YouTube, basically. But, yeah, so paying me in subscription is awesome because it costs you nothing. Quick, painless, costs you nothing. So please consider that. Also hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, and I'm doing 4 a week, which I think is pretty good. But regardless, I really do thank you for taking your time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.